right. Well, my let's say, outdoor friends, they see the large garden that I have out here and the amount of veggie beds, and they'll mistakenly refer to me as a farmer. And it's not that I take offense at that label, it's quite the contrary. I find it disrespectful to the real farmers, and it's just an inaccurate description of my role here in this, what's going on. I have a garden, and even more specifically, it's an urban garden. And what gardening means can be different by the gardener. But for me, it's definitely not the same thing as being a farmer. Farmers feed our society by professionally optimizing for utility and production. And for me, I garden for what I like and for what I think looks and feels good to be in and around. I also garden to experiment and to try growing different things in different ways. I most definitely do not optimize for production or utility. And as you watch my videos and you see some of the silly things I do, you'll notice that. I do have to consider how to achieve efficiencies because I choose to garden at such a large scale here. And I also prefer a style that is more structured and sometimes against nature's course. And so I'm not as free form in line with nature as you see with a lot of other kind of contemporary gardeners. Because I'm an urban gardener, I also have to consider things like where my compost is located, what goes into my compost, and what it may attract in terms of pests. I'm fortunate enough to have a large enough space here that the compost piles can be placed away from structures and particularly away from our house, which makes me a little less concerned about the pests, but still, I don't want to be a rat farm for the neighborhood. It's also a choice on my part to create curb appeal, but that's something I enjoy with being an urban gardener. It's fun to see the passersby on foot or in the car stop and gander, and even there's cars that will stop and take pictures occasionally. And it's also fun when time allows, and if they're open to it, to strike up a conversation and learn about their interests in gardens and gardening. But when it comes to curb appeal, I say it's a choice because we don't have an HOA here or anything like that. And within city code limits, I could certainly just not care what my gardening does to the neighborhood look. And it probably says something about me that I do care and that I enjoy thinking that my garden is a net positive for the neighborhood in terms of the look and aesthetic. I don't prescribe that thinking for everyone out there. It's just, yeah, it makes me feel good to care about that and work on it. I could collect rainwater here, but that's something that I'm looking forward in the future. Right now, I just use the city water in my urban garden, and I'm not on a well or anything like that. I don't have an on-site reservoir. Those are things that would be common for an actual farm. Farms have to deal with scale, how to produce large amounts of food using large plots in a limited amount of time with limited resources in terms of labor and other inputs. My garden doesn't have to turn a profit, and it certainly does not, as my wife reminds me all the time. I don't have an unlimited budget, but I'm not measuring inputs against outputs in the same systematic, crucial way that a farmer needs to when they're operating a farming enterprise. I talk about following Charles Dowding a lot on my videos. He does describe himself, well, I would say he doesn't describe himself as a farmer either, but he does sell vegetables to restaurants and markets that are local to his area. He describes himself as a market gardener. The market part of that term indicates that he is doing what he's doing at a professional level, but the use of gardener instead of farmer, I think, is intentional, and it indicates his scale as being different and him being somewhat different than a farmer. So I guess what I mean to convey with this is that you aren't going to find the most efficient, either cost-wise or production-wise, optimized from gardening with me here at PDX Garden Home when you watch my videos and you follow along with me. Hopefully what you find is inspiration to try new things and some fun and enjoy your space and to enjoy your gardening. Those things are not entirely mutually exclusive. The Venn diagrams of optimizing for production and enjoying what you're doing can definitely overlap, but the focus for me is different than just pure production and utility. And yeah, just wanted to share my thoughts on that and why I enjoy being an urban gardener and why I think that's different than thinking of myself as a market gardener or a farmer. Well, we're turning a corner here at PDX Garden Home, at least I think so. I'm thinking and hoping that we should have temperatures in the next couple of weeks that are high enough to actually put some of the hot weather crops, you know, your typical, your tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, cucumbers, squashes, that kind of thing out into the garden beds. It's certainly not warm enough right now. We're just now getting to a point where we're going to have, this coming week, it looks like we're going to have some 50-degree nights, but we also are going to have some mid 40-degree nights, maybe even a little bit lower, so not consistently in the 50s. But that's my trigger to move things from the basement over to the greenhouse, which is nice because it means I'm actually doing a couple things at the same time. It means I get to do more of the work outside. I don't have to like hang out in the greenhouse. And some of the work that I'm doing is I'm moving these eggplants, for example, into the greenhouse, but they also are ready to be potted up. So you can see here I've got roots all the way to the bottom here. It's a nice big plant. So I am going to pop them up into these kind of 1 gallon container plants here, pots here. I've got a mix that is a kind of an outdoor potting mix from Grimm's that I've mixed with almost, I'd say maybe 40% perlite, 40 to 50% perlite, and for drainage. And so I'm going to be potting these up and then putting them in the greenhouse. And like I said, because I'm putting them in the greenhouse, I can actually use my potting bench. I don't have to do this work down in the basement where it's there's no natural light, right? I get to be up here underneath my cool potting bench. So I'm pretty happy about that. You know, and just for reference, for those of you who may have been following the eggplant journey this year, this is the second potting because these were started in the little 6-cell trays like this, and then they were potted up into the red Solo cups, or I also potted them into kind of 4-inch pots, a combination of both, just what I happen to have. And now I'm potting them up into these bigger pots here. So it's the second potting. I need to do that in order to because the weather is not going to turn quick enough to put them in the beds, and so I need to give them some more space to grow, maybe some more fertilizer, and let them hang out and keep the doors closed, the greenhouse, make it a nice warm spot in there for them to hang out. And that brings up another thing. In order to create a nice warm spot in the greenhouse that would be ideal for my peppers and eggplants and tomatoes, you know, that means that I kind of close all the doors and everything, and with the light, even with just this kind of little bit of ambient light, it's overcast, it can get 80 degrees in there, right? That's not ideal for some of my cool weather crops that have been in the greenhouse, like lettuce and spinach and bok choy and kale and stuff like that. So I've moved all of those cool weather crops out to the outdoor nursery staging area. So my outdoor nursery is fairly full to make room in the greenhouse to bring these things up from the basement. Here are some of the things I'm planting this week. I'm sowing French marigold seeds from my own saved seeds. Because I have a lot of them, I'm sowing very heavily. It's also because I'm a little bit skeptical of the germination, but so far so good. I'll do a video on this for you later. In the ground, I'm planting my 4th round of spinach. I'm planting lettuce, I'm planting broccoli, kohlrabi, kale, and Copenhagen cabbage. The stuff going to the ground is all coming from starts in my nursery area. I'm excited to be getting some of your comments on my videos here at PDX Garden Home, sharing some of your challenges and questions. It gives me inspiration on things to cover, and the first one I wanted to hit on was the greenhouse. The greenhouse is from a company called Exacco Trading Company, but it was actually bought through Costco. It was a kit. You do require kind of multiple people and some construction savvy to put it together, I would say. We had to put down the brick floor first, essentially, level the ground, put in the sand that goes underneath the brick, all that kind of stuff, and learn how to put down the brick kind of flooring. And then we put the greenhouse on top of that. It has anchors in each corner of the greenhouse, but it otherwise doesn't have like a foundation. So it's not like real construction in that sense. It comes in a kit of the metal, the kind of metal aluminum green supports and kind of the structure of it. And then it comes in flats with the glass. We had the choice of glass or polycarbonate, and the company actually called me to explain that while they have a lot of people who like the glass, the look of it, that the polycarbonate is actually better for keeping things warm. And so they wanted to give me the option. And I chose the glass because I always saw the greenhouse here as kind of an anchor focal point of the garden. And as I've kind of expressed in other videos, a lot of what I do in the garden has less to do with production and more with the look. And so the look overrode anything in that case of choosing the glass. You know, it's kind of expensive. I think it was on the top end of expense for greenhouse kits that you could get at Costco. I had 2 helpers at the time that were working for me otherwise in other businesses that I had that helped me construct the greenhouse. So that's what I mean, having labor to do it would be helpful. It warms up when it's sunny, so when there's light, it'll warm up. Like even with the ambient light around here, it gets to at least 80 degrees with the doors open. If I close the doors, it'd be 90, 95 degrees with just this amount of light that's overcast. So just enough, you know, having some light will kind of really heat it up in there, but it doesn't keep the heat when there isn't light. So in the dead of night, it's not warmer in there than it is necessarily outside, which is why you hear me talk about growing plants in my basement nursery. So I don't start plants in the greenhouse usually. This time of year, I will start plants in the greenhouse nursery, stuff that is more cold tolerant or even prefers cooler temps for germination, like lettuces and spinaches and maybe even some brassicas now. The glass is tempered glass that will, it's called safety glass. So if it were to break, it'll shatter completely so that it doesn't leave rough edges that can cut people. So that's a nice feature. But I have had a couple of panes break at various times for various reasons, and so I just go to a local kind of glass shop in town and we give them the dimensions and they make a new pane for us, which we can slip in here. I'm not necessarily sold on the idea of a built-in shelf. I like it. It's good, so I'm not against it necessarily, but I also like having the modular metal, the modular kind of chrome shelves that you see in there, because I can change their configuration on an annual basis if I want. The greenhouse comes with some shades, and you'll see that I pulled the shades in the back so that the late afternoon sun doesn't overheat the greenhouse. When the sun's really out and it's really hotter later this year, I'll pull both shades during the daytime to keep it a little bit cooler in there. I'll open all the windows and open the doors and that kind of thing. One thing that I might do different is that, and I think it would cost extra, but the way this kit is set up is that you could install the doors on either side, the sliding doors I could have installed on either side, and I think what would have been helpful is to actually install the sliding doors on both ends of the greenhouse. So I actually have 2 sets of doors. That way I could open up both ends completely. I think that would have really helped maybe air it out and keep it really cooler in the summertime. As it is, one of the things I'm going to try doing this summer, what I've done in the past is grown like eggplants and melons in there, but even for melons, my flowers would drop because it would be hard to keep it from getting above 95 when it's at the hottest here in Portland. When it's, you get into late July, early August, even with the shades closed and the windows open and fans going, it's really hard to keep it a reasonable temperature in there. So that's why having doors on both sides could be helpful. I think that would be an add-on. It would probably be asking the company for paying extra for that extra piece. Size of this greenhouse is about 200 square feet. If I remember right, it's 10 foot by 20 foot. Like if it was a smaller greenhouse, I think it might be easier to keep the heat in. I could maybe put a space heater. I can't put like just an electric space heater in there and keep the heat in. It's just too big to warm that volume. I would need some major electrical pumped in there. Really, I'd probably need to have like some gas heater and some more professional heating in there to keep something that size heated. So, would I like something that was like twice the size? I mean, yeah, in theory, but there's other things that go along with that. Like how would you heat something twice that size if you wanted to keep it heated? Given the cost of it, I was looking at Costco to see if they had this one again, and it looks like they do. But I also saw one from Yardstreet, which is a company that also usually does like the gazebos and stuff, which I think are kind of cool. I don't have one of those here, but it had a cedar greenhouse. It was small. It has a smaller footprint. Looks really nice. It's got polycarbonate, but I think it looks really nice. I think I'd be tempted, like if I was on a smaller lot or just a smaller budget, I think I'd be really tempted to go for that one. So that might be something to look at. The greenhouse roof will collect a lot of dust or pollen, or just there's kind of I don't know that it's pollen per se, but there's like this kind of yellow dust that comes from the kind of the cedar trees around here, and it kind of all settles on there. So we try to brush that off and wash it off, but it seems like I can never quite get ahead of that. So there's a certain amount of cleaning and maintenance. I mean, if you're getting it for the look, keeping it cleaned is part of keeping that look. Well, I've been anxious to have a harvest that I can take to the food pantry every week. And with the weather we've been having, it's not obvious what and how much is actually out here in these beds. When you just look over the beds, there isn't an abundance jumping out like there will be, say, a month from now. But if you look closer and you really get in there, you really look, I found that quite a bit of harvest is actually there. And I've posted some of those harvests in previous videos, but that's all from stuff that's just kind of, I'm scrounging around in there. And sometimes it takes some creativity and knowing what's good, even if it's not quote unquote conventional. Like when I harvested Brussels sprout and kale rab as an example, that can be eaten like broccoli. I had a lot of that a couple weeks ago, and now I've exhausted that supply. The other challenge is somewhat self-created in this garden. Well, not somewhat, totally self-created in this garden. And that is that I planted everything everywhere. So most of the harvests right now, except for radishes, are coming from plants that were planted last year during the fall or even earlier. And I planted things back then like lettuce and chard, beets, leeks, and they're planted across multiple beds throughout this garden. And I don't remember where everything is necessarily or where I put them. So I have to go on a bit of a hunt to find all that stuff since it was over a year ago and it's just everywhere. But it's not that bad though. I've been able to harvest weekly over the last month, and I'm kind of remembering where everything is because I'm getting out here every week to harvest. But I still get surprises now and then. When I get a nice big plant of kale or something like that, maybe that's hiding amongst the leeks that I didn't anticipate, it's kind of a nice surprise. So what about you all? Are you harvesting right now, or are you waiting for warmer weather? Here's what I harvested this week: radishes, lettuce, beets, and the beet greens.